The moving truck pulled away just before sunset, its taillights vanishing behind a curtain of oak trees. Marcus Bell stood on his new porch with his daughter Ava, both of them quiet, tired, and cautiously hopeful. The house in Maple Ridge was smaller than what they were used to, but it felt like a step forward. Clean air, quiet nights, fresh paint and cedar shingles. It was supposed to be a place where the worst was behind them. Ava tugged at her dad's sleeve. "Do you think people here will be normal?" Marcus laughed softly and tousled her hair. "Define normal, kiddo, 14 years old. Bright, creative, and tougher than most grown men he knew." Ava had epilepsy, frequent, unpredictable seizures that had turned their last few years into a delicate balancing act. School was hard, social life harder after the divorce. Marcus needed somewhere stable, somewhere safe. Maple Ridge looked perfect, almost too perfect. That night, over microwaved burritos and boxes still sealed in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. Ava peeked through the front window. Dad, there's a woman at the door. She looks intense." Marcus opened it to a short woman with a tight bun, stiff posture, and a clipboard clutched like a Bible. Her smile was as sharp as her tone. "Good evening, I'm Karen Whitlock, president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. Just thought I'd personally welcome you and go over a few quick things." Before Marcus could speak, she stepped forward, glanced at the porch light, then down at his trash bins near the garage. "You'll want to bring those in by 6, HOA regulation. 1 to see. Also, porch lights must be soft white LEDs. Those look like daylight bulbs. And front yard decor. No wind chimes, garden flags, or visible religious symbols." Marcus blinked. "We just moved in today." Karen nodded, jotting something on her clipboard. "That's why I came over. Prevention is better than penalties. You'll receive the full rule book in your mailbox tomorrow." She started back toward the sidewalk, pausing only to wave without turning round. "Welcome to the neighborhood." The door clicked shut. Marcus exhaled slowly. Ava raised an eyebrow. "So, we live in a kingdom now." He smiled, but something about the exchange gnawed at him. He'd heard of strict HOAs before, but this was something else. Over the next few days, it continued. On Wednesday, a note was left on his car windshield for parking too close to the curb. On Friday, he received an official horror warning letter for a motion sensor light disturbing neighborhood aesthetics. The camera above his garage was questioned for privacy concerns. He hadn't even unpacked his books yet. Every letter was signed Karen Whitlock, HOA President. The final push came Sunday afternoon. Marcus had just finished putting up Ava's swing in the backyard. An adaptive model, wide-seated, safe, the kind her neurologist recommended for calming after seizures. Ava tried it out immediately, her face lighting up as the wind played in her curls. Karen appeared 15 minutes later. No knock this time, just the sound of her heels clicking against the back patio stones. "Mr. Bell," she said, arms folded. "Swing sets are only permitted if approved by the board. Yours is not." "It's not a swing set. It's a therapeutic swing for my daughter," Marcus replied calmly. She didn't blink. "Still needs board review. We have community standards to maintain." Ava stepped back from the swing, eyes narrowed. "Why do you care so much about what people need?" Karen glanced at her but said nothing, just scribbled on her clipboard, and left. That night, Marcus filed a formal appeal, but he had a sinking feeling it wouldn't matter. Later, as he tucked Ava into bed, she asked quietly, "Do we have to move again?" "No," he said. "No, we don't." But his voice lacked its usual certainty, because deep down, Marcus had already recognized something about Karen Whitlock. This wasn't about trash bins or light bulbs. This was about control, and he was about to learn just how far Karen would go to keep it. It didn't take long for Marcus to realize that everything in Maple Ridge came with unspoken rules. Not the kind written down in the bylaws. Those were dense, vague, and filled with language that sounded more like a contract than a community. No, the real rules were simpler. Don't question Karen. Don't draw attention to yourself. And definitely, don't be different. And Ava, through no fault of her own, was different. She didn't ride the school bus because the noise could trigger seizures. Instead, Marcus dropped her off every morning and picked her up in the afternoon. She wore a medical bracelet, carried a seizure log in her backpack, and had strict instructions in her IEP. Most of the teachers were understanding, a few of the kids were curious, but in a neighborhood obsessed with appearances, even that was enough to stir suspicion. It started with whispers at the corner mailbox. Karen spoke in a lowered voice to Mrs. Talbot, eyes darting toward the Bell residence. One day, a neighbor walked their dog across the street instead of on the sidewalk near Ava's mural. Another family skipped their usual hello on their evening walk. Marcus noticed. He noticed everything. Then came the email. It was from Karen directly. No greeting, no signature, Mr. Bell. It's come to the board's attention that your daughter's recent medical episode was witnessed by multiple families in the neighborhood. While we empathize, public medical incidents can be disruptive and alarming, especially to children. We ask that such situations be handled with greater discretion moving forward. Thank you. Marcus reread the email 3 times before closing his laptop. His hands were trembling. That medical episode had been a mild seizure Ava experienced while sketching birds in the front yard. He had been there in seconds, kneeling beside her, whispering calming words, shielding her from the sun with his body. It lasted less than 2 minutes, and somehow, that had become a community disturbance. He wanted to storm over to Karen's house right then and there, but Ava, sensing his tension, rested her hand on his. Don't, she whispered. That's what she wants. Instead, Marcus began documenting everything, every letter, every visit, every warning tape to his door. He bought a new security camera, carefully positioned just to capture the front walk. He started attending HOA meetings quietly at first just to observe. Karen didn't like that. At the next meeting, Karen stood at the head of the table in the community clubhouse, her voice dripping with Fox authority. We must be vigilant about maintaining our neighborhood's standards. That means enforcing all existing rules and not making exceptions. She never said Marcus's name, but everyone knew. Marcus raised a hand. Is there a process for disability accommodations under the HOA guidelines? Karen didn't answer. Right away, she stared at him, her smile faltering for a split second. Our guidelines were established long before your arrival. We've never had a need for exceptions. But I'll review your request with the board. Marcus nodded, saying nothing more. When he left the meeting that night, 2 board members avoided eye contact with him. One, an older man named Harold, patted his shoulder quietly. Don't take it personal, he murmured. Karen runs things a certain way, always has, even if it hurts a kid, Marcus asked. Harold's mouth tightened. He didn't respond. The next day, Marcus found a new notice on his door. This one cited the unauthorized garden installation in his backyard, a project he and Ava had worked on together. It was her therapy. A few planter boxes, a bench, and a fountain with running water to soothe her when she was recovering. According to the letter, it violated neighborhood harmony aesthetics. The fine was $350. Marcus appealed. The HOA board denied the request unanimously. That night, over dinner, Ava asked him a question that stuck with him. Do you think she's trying to make us leave? Marcus stared at his plate for a long time before answering. I think she doesn't know who she's messing with. Because the more Karen pushed, the more determined he became. He wasn't just protecting his home anymore. He was protecting his daughter, and that was a battle he'd never lose. For a while, Marcus tried to keep the peace. He trimmed the grass a half-inch lower. He parked inside the garage instead of on the curb. He even replaced Ava's bright flower pots with neutral-colored ones that blended into the beige sameness. Karen demanded. He thought maybe, just maybe, if he played by the rules, she'd ease up. But it wasn't about rules. It was about them. Karen wanted them gone. And the next strike proved it. It started with Ava's mural. After her last seizure, Ava had spent hours painting it across the inside of their backyard fence, a landscape of stars, rolling hills, and animals with wings. For her, it was more than art. It was a way to heal, a way to feel control over something. Marcus helped her prime the fence, and she did the rest. Neighbors on both sides had no issue with it. One even complimented the artwork, but Karen found a way to make it a problem. Marcus came home one Thursday to find a folded violation notice on the front porch, sealed with red tape. He opened it, expecting the usual nonsense. This one hit different. Unauthorized graffiti on backyard fence facing neighbor's property. Removal required within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in escalating fines. He went straight to Karen's house, not angry, not yelling, just tired. She opened the door with a smug expression like she'd been waiting for this moment. "It's art, Karen," he said, holding the letter up. "And it's facing our own yard. It's not visible from the street. Our neighbors don't mind." Karen tilted her head and bothered. The HOA bylaws clearly state that exterior structures must maintain visual harmony with the community aesthetic. Marcus lowered the paper. "It's a painting done by a child recovering from a seizure disorder. You really think that's your fight?" Karen folded her arms. "We all make sacrifices to live in a community. Mr. Bell, maybe it's time you learned that." That night, Marcus didn't sleep. He drafted an appeal. Again, this time, he included statements from his neighbors, pictures. Even Ava's doctors know explaining the therapeutic benefit of art for epilepsy recovery. The board denied it. No discussion, no explanation. And then, things got worse. Marcus returned from a grocery run one afternoon to find a black SUV parked crooked in his driveway. Two plainclothes individuals stood at the door, serious faces, badges on belts. "Mr. Marcus Bell," one asked. "Yeah, we're responding to a report from a resident of this community regarding potential neglect and unsafe conditions involving your daughter." Marcus froze. "Excuse me," the other officer continued. "Allegations of frequent unsupervised seizures, unsanitary living conditions, and a minor operating potentially hazardous materials, namely paint and solvents." Marcus blinked. "You've got to be kidding me. We're required to perform a wellness check." Eva, hearing voices, peeked out from behind the curtain. They walked through the house, made polite notes, and left 20 minutes later with an apology, though not a strong one. As soon as the door closed, Marcus collapsed onto the couch, head in his hands. Eva sat beside him, silent. Then she asked quietly, "Did Karen call them?" He looked at her, at this brave, tired girl who just wanted to be left alone, and he felt something twist in his chest. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, he downloaded every HOA meeting recording, every newsletter, every bylaw, and he started building a folder titled Maple Ridge Truth. The next morning, Karen strutted past his driveway as if nothing had happened. Marcus stepped outside, coffee in hand, and stared her down. She glanced at him but said nothing. He didn't wave. He didn't smile. He just stood there, still. Moving. A storm, waiting. Because this was no longer a matter of neighborhood disagreements or broken rules. This was a campaign, and Karen had just declared war on the wrong man. The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Tuesday night at the Maple Ridge Community Center. Normally, only a few residents showed up, mostly retirees and board loyalists. But that night, something was different. The room was packed. Marcus arrived early, dressed in a plain button-down and jeans, with a black folder tucked under his arm. Ava stayed home. By his request, he didn't want her anywhere near what was coming. Karen stood at the front, flanked by the other board members for people Marcus barely knew. She wore a soft blue blazer and pearls, and she smiled like a queen preparing for applause. She didn't know Marcus had been recording. For weeks, he collected everything: voicemail messages, HOA notices, photos of Ava's art, copies of all formal appeals and rejections. He had a time-stamped video of Karen walking up and down his driveway taking photos of his house. He had a letter from Ava's therapist stating that the art mural and garden were part of her treatment place. And most importantly, he had a recording from his Ring camera. Karen standing at his front door, saying, "Your daughter needs to stay inside if she can't behave herself in public. We have standards here." The meeting began as usual, mundane updates, budget votes, fence regulations. Then, Karen opened the floor. "Before we close, is there any new business?" she asked, already half turned toward her binder. Marcus stood. Karen blinked. "Mr. Bell, I have several concerns to address," Marcus said calmly, his voice carrying through the room. "I'd like to share some recent actions taken by this board, especially regarding discrimination, abuse of power, and targeted harassment." Karen's face didn't move, but the room suddenly got quieter. "First," Marcus continued, "I'd like to ask why every single one of my appeals has been denied without discussion or evidence, while other owners have received waivers for non-conforming elements. That's not public information." Karen snapped. "I filed freedom of information requests on HOA vote records," Marcus said, holding up a packet. "This shows that out of 11 total decisions made this year, 9 were voted unanimously. Except for mine. You've rubber-stamped every denial related to me or my daughter." People were listening now, leaning forward. "Second," Marcus said, sliding a small speaker onto the podium, "I want to play an audio clip recorded on my property." Karen stepped forward. "Mr. Bell, this is a violation of HOA procedure." He hit play. Karen's voice echoed through the room. "We have standards here. Your daughter needs to stay inside." Gasps. A chair creaked. One woman in the second row dropped her pen. Karen's face darkened. "That was taken out of context." "Was it?" Marcus said. "Because here's a CPS referral document filed by someone claiming I let my daughter roam unsupervised while experiencing medical events. And a call log from a caseworker who visited our home because of that anonymous tip, which conveniently came one day after I defended my daughter's therapy swing." Karen opened her mouth, but couldn't form words. "Let's talk about that swing," Marcus went on, "and the mural, and the garden. Every single thing designed to help my daughter live a normal, safe life has been challenged by you personally." The room sat in frozen silence. Then a voice from the crowd spoke up. "I thought the mural was beautiful," said Mrs. Delgado, a neighbor from 2 doors down. "My grandkids loved it." More voices joined in, quiet but firm. "He's right. Karen's been on his case since day one. I've seen her taking pictures of his house every morning. I had to fight her over a mailbox color. She's power hungry." Karen raised both hands, trying to regain control. "Enough. This is all hearsay and emotional dramatics. The board operates within the guidelines set by this community. If you don't like the standards, perhaps this isn't the right neighborhood for you." But no one nodded this time. No one backed her up. Marcus took a slow breath. "You want me gone. But I'm not going anywhere." He turned to the board. "This is your chance to do the right thing, or you'll be answering to a much bigger audience." Karen scoffed. "Is that a threat?" Marcus looked her dead in the eyes. "No, that's a promise." After the meeting, something shifted. Karen wasn't smiling anymore. She walked out of the community center without saying a word. Her clipboard clutched so tightly the metal corners bent slightly in her grip. She didn't look at Marcus. She didn't look at anyone. But Marcus knew that silence wasn't surrender. It was a warning. And it didn't take long for Karen to strike again, only this time. It wasn't just petty fines or threats. It was violence. It happened on a Friday. Marcus had left for the grocery store around 3:30 p.m. Ava State Homeschool had just let out, and she was decompressing from a tough week with a quiet walk around the neighborhood. She carried her sketchbook, as always, tucked under one arm and a water bottle in the other. She walked slowly, staying close to the sidewalks, earbuds in but low enough to hear traffic. That day, Karen's 2 golden retrievers were loose in the yard again. Normally they barked, but that afternoon, they lunged at the fence, snarling and clawing. The sudden noise startled Ava. And, just like that, the seizure hit. She collapsed to the grass near the sidewalk right outside Karen's property line. A neighbor, Mr. Fisher, saw the whole thing from across the street. He would later tell police. It was one of the most disturbing things he'd ever witnessed. Karen stormed out of her house, phone in hand, shouting, "What's going on out here?" Mr. Fisher yelled, "She's having a seizure." But Karen didn't move with urgency. She didn't call 911. Instead, she approached Ava with suspicion, like a trespasser had invaded her front lawn. Ava's arm was twitching. Her sketchbook lay open in the grass beside her. She couldn't speak, couldn't control her body, and then Karen reached into her handbag. She pulled out a small black device, or taser, the kind sold online for personal protection. Mr. Fisher screamed from his porch, "Hey, what are you doing?" Karen didn't stop. "I don't know what this girl's doing," she barked, pacing toward Ava. "She's flailing around, could be on something, could be dangerous. She's not a threat," Mr. Fisher shouted. "She needs medical help." Karen didn't wait. She activated the taser and jabbed it once toward Ava's leg. The scream that followed didn't just come from the girl on the ground. It came from multiple neighbors, from the ones watching from windows, from the couple walking their dog nearby, from Mr. Fisher sprinting across the street as fast as his old knees could carry him. Karen stepped back, wide-eyed, as if she had been the victim. She was thrashing. She insisted. Looking round, she looked unstable. Mr. Fisher dropped to his knees beside Ava, dialing 911. Karen stood off to the side, muttering that it was all a misunderstanding. Marcus arrived just 5 minutes later, but it felt like a lifetime. He saw the ambulance, the flashing lights, the stretcher. He saw Karen, arms folded and stiff, speaking to a young police officer, trying to twist the story. And he saw Ava, his daughter, half conscious, pale, her body trembling with shock. He rushed forward, only to be gently restrained by a paramedic. "She's stable. We're taking her to County General." Marcus turned to the officer. "Is she being arrested?" he asked, pointing directly at Karen. The officer hesitated. "She claims it was self-defense. Said she thought your daughter was on drugs. We'll need statements from everyone." Marcus exploded. "She was having a seizure. She's 14. What the hell kind of law says you can tase a child for lying on the sidewalk?" Karen chimed in from behind. "I feared for my safety." "Don't you say a damn word," Marcus snapped, voice breaking. He looked around. People had gathered. Phones were out. Some were filming. Others were comforting one another like something awful had just shattered the false peace of the neighborhood. Because it had. That night, Ava stayed in the hospital under observation. The taser had left a mark, nothing life-threatening, but enough to confirm the use of force. Marcus didn't sleep. He sat beside her, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Her hand was limp in his. By dawn, something inside him hardened. Karen had stepped over a line, and Marcus wasn't just going to fight back this time. He was going to finish it. The morning sun filtered through the hospital blinds like nothing had happened. But for Marcus Bell, everything had changed. Eva was resting quietly, bandaged and pale. Her heart monitor beeped in rhythm, a sound Marcus had come to dread. The doctors said she'd be okay, physically, but the emotional trauma would linger. She hadn't spoken much since waking up, just stared blankly at the ceiling. Her sketchbook untouched on the nightstand outside her room. Marcus paced the hallway like a caged animal. He'd made his calls, first to his lawyer, then to the local news, and finally to an advocacy group he'd found online, one that specialized in horror, abuse, and disability discriminate. What Karen had done wasn't just cruel, it was criminal. But as he learned quickly, criminal charges didn't come easy when the aggressor wore pearls, carried a clipboard, and had friends on the city council. By noon, he had his first conversation with the responding officer from the day before. "I'm not gonna sugarcoat it," Officer Denning said over the phone. "We're getting pressure from both sides." Mrs. Whitlock's claiming she acted in fear. "She's already filed an incident report stating your daughter appeared to be in medical distress and posed a potential danger. She's 14. Marcus snapped. "She was having a seizure. You saw the hospital photos." "I agree," Denning replied. But proving excessive force in this case is complicated. We'll need sworn witness statements. Video footage would help. Marcus hung up without saying goodbye. He knew what he had to do. By that evening, Marcus had compiled a folder, physical and digital, labeled simply Karen Whitlock, threat. Inside were signed affidavits from Mr. Fisher, Mrs. Delgado, and two other neighbors who had either witnessed the incident or had previously clashed with Karen. One of them, a school teacher named Angela Ramos, even described how Karen had tried to prevent her from installing a wheelchair-accessible ramp for her elderly mother, calling it an eyesore. There was a pattern. A sick one. Karen wasn't just power-hungry, she was obsessed with control, and she used horror rules to mask her prejudice. Marcus didn't stop there. He filed a civil lawsuit. It included counts of negligence, harassment, assault of a minor, and targeted discrimination against a person with a disability. He listed the HOA as a co-defendant, demanding access to all internal communications from the past 12 months. The board, caught off guard, held an emergency meeting. Marcus wasn't invited, but that didn't stop him. The next morning, he posted a statement on the Maple Ridge neighborhood message board. My daughter was assaulted while experiencing a seizure. The assailant is your HOA president. If you've ever felt bullied, harassed, or unfairly targeted in this neighborhood, reach out to me. I'm done staying quiet. Within hours, his inbox flooded. Fines, property violations, anonymous complaints. Karen's signature on nearly all of them. People who'd been too afraid to speak were now emboldened. They shared stories, screenshots, videos. Some were minor, like a man fined $50 for a garden gnome, but others were deeply disturbing. Fines for bilingual signs, threats over children's toys in front yards, and one particularly gut-wrenching account of a veteran forced to remove a ramp for nonconformity. Karen's empire was beginning to crack, but Marcus wanted more than pressure. He wanted exposure. He gave an interview to a local news affiliate standing right in front of the mural Aver had painted. She's just a kid, he told the reporter. She didn't break a single law. She didn't pose a threat. She was hurt. And the person who hurt her is still walking around this neighborhood like she owns it. The interview aired at 6. By 8. The HOA's voicemail was full. By 9. Karen's face was trending online with photos of her holding the taser, screenshotted from a neighbor's doorbell cam. She issued a written statement to the board. I acted in the moment to protect myself and my property. I regret the incident, but will not be intimidated by a media smear campaign. But the neighborhood wasn't buying it. The mayor's office called Marcus personally to discuss a peaceful resolution. And that's when Marcus got a call from his lawyer, his voice tight with barely contained excitement. I just got the HOA's internal emails from Discovery, he said. You're going to want to read what Karen wrote about your daughter. What did she say? Marcus asked. Heart racing. There was a pause. She called Aver a liability. And she wrote that if they apply enough pressure, the father will fold. They always do. Marcus said nothing for a long time. Then he whispered, not this time. Because now, it wasn't just about justice. It was about consequences. Marcus didn't expect the twist to come from Harold. Harold Jenkins had served on the HOA board for nearly 15 years. Quiet, polite, mostly neutral during meetings. He rarely spoke unless prompted. And even then, it was usually just a nod or a vote. But when the lawsuit landed and Karen's face hit the evening news, Harold reached out. He showed up on Marcus's porch and announced, a manila envelope tucked under one arm and eyes clouded with guilt. I should have done this sooner, Harold said. But I was scared. We all were. Marcus stepped aside without a word and let the man in. Inside the envelope was more than Marcus could have hoped for. Dozens of internal horror emails, some were between board members, others directly from Karen. And buried halfway down the stack was a thread dated 3 weeks before Aver was tased. Karen had written, the Bell girl is a walking liability. She doesn't belong in a neighborhood like this. Her seizures make people uncomfortable. If we apply enough pressure, the father will fold. They always do. Another board member, Laura Kim, had replied, "You're taking this too far. He's not violating anything serious." Karen's response was chilling. "Then we create violations. We'll hit him with everything, sooner or later. He'll snap or sell. I've done it before." Marcus's hands clenched as he read. Harold tapped a finger on the final printout. "There's more. Karen's been misusing HOA funds. She's approved landscaping projects that didn't happen, paid vendors who are licensed, and she's written herself reimbursement checks for things that don't exist. Receipts never matched." Marcus looked up. "You're saying she's embezzling?" Harold nodded once. "Yes. And I can testify to it. This changed everything. It wasn't just a civil suit anymore. It was criminal." Marcus's lawyer filed a motion the next morning, evidence of premeditated harassment, falsified HOA enforcement, and potential financial fraud. The court approved a subpoena for HOA financial records going back 2 years. The City Ethics Commission launched a parallel investigation. But that wasn't all. Harold, along with 2 other former board members, went public. They held a press conference on the steps of City Hall, with reporters present, cameras rolling, and microphones live. Harold said plainly, Karen Whitlock used her position to target vulnerable families. She manipulated rules, used fines as weapons, and created a culture of fear. What she did to Ava Bell wasn't an accident, it was part of a pattern. Within hours, the video went viral. News anchors called her the HOA tyrant. Comment sections exploded with stories from other neighborhoods, other Karens. But no one's story was as shocking or enraging as Ava's. Public pressure mounted. Like a tidal wave. Karen tried to fight back. She posted a video of her own, sitting in her pristine living room with an American flag behind her and a trembling teacup in hand. "I've always worked to preserve this neighborhood's standards," she said. "The Bells, they brought conflict. They didn't follow rules, and now they're twisting this into something it's not." But it was too late, because while Karen spoke, a new document surfaced. Marcus had received it from a whistleblower who once worked as the HOA's part-time bookkeeper. It was a reimbursement request signed by Karen claiming nearly $900 for legal consulting regarding Bell family liability. Dated just 3 days before Ava's mural was classified as graffiti, the implication was undeniable. Karen had spent community funds to build a case against a child. That evening, the HOA board called an emergency vote without Karen present. They removed her from the presidency in a unanimous decision. 2 hours later, police showed up at Karen's house with a warrant in hand. Embezzlement, fraud, assault, conspiracy to harass. Karen was handcuffed in her driveway, screaming about how she was protecting the neighborhood. Phones recorded every second. The same neighbors she once ruled with threats now stood silently, watching as she was placed in the back of the cruiser. Marcus didn't cheer. He didn't smile. He just stood in his yard with Ava beside him, holding her hand. She said, "We'd fold." Ava whispered. Marcus glanced down at her. "We don't fold," he said. "We stand." 2 weeks after Karen's arrest, Maple Ridge looked different. Gone was the silence, the curtain peeking, the forced smiles. In its place was something almost unfamiliar in the neighborhood, or sense of relief, as if people could breathe again without watching their every step, without worrying if a flower pot or the child's laughter would earn them a fine. Karen was gone, but her damage lingered. Marcus knew the battle wasn't over. Not yet. Ava had returned home from the hospital and was doing better. Her physical injuries were healing. But the emotional scars weren't as visible or as quick to mend. She no longer walked alone. She flinched when dogs barked, and her sketchbook stayed shut more often than open. So Marcus shifted his focus from defense to action. The lawsuit proceeded with new momentum. With Harold's testimony, the bookkeeper's documents, and over a dozen neighbor statements, Marcus's attorney filed a revised civil claim for damages, medical bills, and emotional distress. The claim wasn't just against Karen now, it included the HOA board as co-defendants. citing willful negligence and complicity in a hostile environment. Faced with mounting pressure and bad PR, the HOA's insurance agency stepped in. They settled 7 figures. Enough to cover Ava's therapy and treatment for years to come, enough to fund a project Marcus had only dreamed of until now. He used part of the settlement to launch a nonprofit in Ava's name, Open Gate, an organization committed to defending families targeted by far-reaching HOA letters, especially those with disabled or medically vulnerable members. The story continued to spread. News stations across the country ran follow-ups. HOA reform groups requested interviews. One major streaming platform even contacted Marcus about adapting the case into a documentary series. But the final justice came not in the headlines, but in the courtroom. Karen Whitlock's trial began 6 months after her arrest. She arrived in a gray pantsuit, no pearls, hair pulled back loosely instead of her usual bun. She didn't make eye contact with Marcus or Ava. The prosecution laid everything out. The emails, the Taser incident, the financial records, the statements from former board members. Karen tried to paint herself as misunderstood, claimed the Taser was never deployed, claimed she'd been targeted by an online mob. But the jury didn't buy it. She was found guilty on 3 charges: assault of a minor, misuse of community funds, and targeted harassment under state civil rights law. The sentence: 18 months in county jail, 5 years probation, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA or residential board in the state. She was let out of the courtroom in silence. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Marcus. They asked if he was happy, if he felt vindicated. He looked to his daughter, standing beside him, stronger than ever. "I didn't want revenge," he said. "I wanted peace. And I wanted to protect my daughter. That's all." Then he paused, "And maybe I wanted Karen to understand what it feels like to be powerless." Just once, back in Maple Ridge, life slowly returned to normal. The HOA board was restructured. Harold was named interim president, and a community vote was scheduled to decide its future. One of the first motions passed: permanent bylaws protecting families with medical conditions and disabilities from targeted enforcement. Ava's mural, it stayed up. In fact, the new board funded a protective sealant over it to preserve the colors. Neighbors came by more often now, not to report violations, but to talk, to thank Marcus, to check on Ava. The woman who once looked at Ava's seizures with judgment now brought her homemade cookies and an apology. A father who once stayed silent showed up to help Marcus build a bench beneath the tree swing. And one evening, as the sun sank low and golden light danced on the backyard fence, Ava finally opened her sketchbook again. She drew quietly, pencil in hand, lips pressed in concentration. Marcus watched from the porch. She was drawing stars. Then mountains. Then standing tall in the middle of it all, a girl with wind in her hair and fire in her eyes. A fighter, a survivor. And next to her, in bold, swirling letters, Ava wrote, "We don't fold. We rise." Marcus smiled. The battle was over, but the message would live on forever.